Catharina, you can stay with me here on stage, because now let's delve a little deeper into the whole thing with our panel discussion on the CSDDD, LkSG, and the changing legislative landscape. For this, I ask to join me on stage again Harald, because he will lead the discussion. Welcome back, Harald.
I'm back.
And yeah, always, applause is always good, especially for Harald, who's working so hard the whole day. I also invite Markus Löning, the founder and managing director of Löning Human Rights and Responsible Business GmbH. You can already take a seat if you like to. Okay. As well as Tim Geier, managing director European Affairs at SME Groups Germany, or der Mittelstand, as it's called in German.
Nice to see
Richard Wilhelm, he's head of department LkSG at BAFA. And now it's time for Sebastian Rünz, salary partner, Taylor and Wessing. And I hand over to Harald.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So I think we really have a very high profile and a lot of smarts here up on stage, and we want to have first a conversation on three main topics. That is experiences from the German Supply Chain Act, from these various perspectives, and I think we took great care to have the different perspectives on this topic. We then want to look at the impacts and the effects of the due diligence legislations on those companies that are not directly affected. And the third part will be an outlook into the future and the challenges ahead. And then, of course, we will also open up Slido for some of your questions. So the first part, again, we have many different perspectives. We have Markus consulting and supporting many companies in various industries of various sizes, implementation of due diligence more broadly than the Supply Chain Act, but also the Supply Chain Act. Last year, I remember you were here, and what I have not forgotten you said is that we need a more pragmatic approach. But last year we were also in the phase where everybody was trying to wrestle with the data and getting it set up. Is this still your opinion today? Has it changed? What is the perception today?
First of all, thank you very much, and taking a pragmatic approach is always a good idea. I don't think I will change my mind on that. But I see that companies have greatly progressed over the last year. And what I can see is that companies move from implementation towards more strategic thinking. So we have clients that come up to us and say, well, we have implemented this, like the risk identification. We're working with Prewave in this. We started training our people. Then we have some measures, but we miss the strategic roof. And we want to bring it all together, say, what is the actual benefit for our company? What's the medium and long-term strategy? Bring this all together, what's the business benefit? So I see a clear development, and I see an explosion in knowledge. I also see, if I compare what you were presenting last year and what you're doing this year, wow. This is a leap forward. And it reflects what's happening in companies. It reflects the enormous impact that the legislation has on development of knowledge, of technology, and all of that. So still pragmatic, but a lot better than a year ago.
I think what you're just saying reflects perfectly where companies are in terms of what they need to do. Yeah, because last year it was all about risk analysis and the data and where do we focus. Yeah. Today they're already taking action or supposed to take action, and that brings the question, what are we doing and what's the right action? And that is one last point to you, Markus, because you are really working cross-industry with impact analysis, oftentimes on the ground. What is the impact that the German Supply Chain Act had so far on the actually affected workers in the value chain?
The impact it actually has, I think it's too early to really measure, like salaries are paid on time or things like that. What I see the impact is that companies start working with unions, for example. There's this case of garment industry in Pakistan. So we need to work with the unions to make sure we have an approach, Pakistani law is reflected. We see other companies, large food retailers, for example, coming to us and say, we have all these measures, why don't they really work? So there's a reflection on impact, and companies try, what is it that will actually change the situation on the ground? And that's normal at this stage. Nobody has a perfect solution for measures that will create impact on the shelf. You need to try what's good in this country, in that region, in this industry. And that's going on, and I think that's good. It needs to happen.
So to summarize, I really hear you feel like it goes generally in a productive direction.
I'm always optimistic, otherwise I wouldn't work in this industry.
Me too. Going to the other side of the panel, Sebastian, the legal perspective. Yeah? You, of course, have a different perspective, different engagement with clients. How has that changed over the last 1.5 years? Has it changed?
Yeah, so I agree with Markus. I can definitely see the progress of the companies. But the quality of implementation can be very different. And you can see this in particular when you look at the reports that have been published so far. There are a lot of companies that did a good job. They were diligent. And then there are still some where you get the impression they still think the German Supply Chain Act is a joke. And when you read the report, you get the feeling somebody didn't really take it serious. So you have both, but in general, I'm also optimistic that it goes into the right direction. I mean, so far there are a lot of like low-hanging fruits the companies collect that are pretty easy. For example, non-complex preventive measures like supplier code of conduct or implementing a complaints procedure. But when it gets to the complex measures, then some companies have a rather static approach and still try to have a paper compliance, one size fits all. And yeah, I hope to see that this progresses and that the data that is actually collected from a lot of suppliers is also followed on, is analyzed, and then is taken to have a more risk-based approach and to also focus on some more of the complex, far-reaching measures. I mean, Markus and I, we did a webinar on this this year to show that there is much more than those easy preventive measures and other more complex measures the LkSG also foresees.
Okay. So to summarize, what you're saying is the companies have vastly different maturity, vastly different approaches to the topic. Some are more on the check the box compliance and others are more on the in-depth approach. Maybe if I can go to Mr. Wilhelm. Obviously, you're sitting on the other side of the table, having a different view on this matter. How has the situation evolved from you? I think you're now getting the first reports. Do you also see a spectrum of maturity, let's say, from what you're getting? Or what's your perspective?
Yeah, totally. Actually, what Mr. Rünz just mentioned is something that we experienced as well. That there is, it differs a lot, and there is a different approach from certain companies. What was surprising for us was actually that a larger amount of the reports we already got were those shortened reports, something that we actually did not take into account. It would be this much because that actually states we haven't identified any risks that are not taken, that they were not already taken into account, or that were not already taken into a measure. And we did not expect this because we thought everyone would just show some of their risks that are clearly there and that are actually for us also foreseeable. But now we started to get a dialogue on these reports as well to understand how companies evaluate their risks and to get a common understanding of what a risk might be in the scope of the LkSG. And this is something that we could experience over the last 1.5 years, that this continuous dialogue is so important for all of us to understand where we are coming from, because I mean nobody started with the point zero. They all all the companies we're dealing with had some kind of risk management, and they were, of course, taking measures on some risk or violations. And now we're trying to get a common idea where to go with that, and a common language, to say so, on risks, on violations, and on the effect on those who are actually affected and who should be affected by the positive aspects of the LkSG. And what we also see is that the companies did some large steps into the direction of shifting the mindset from it's just a matter of compliance to we have to take other things into account, as for example our purchase or the procurement, because there you would have the largest impact on the whole supply chain, and that's actually a good step. And we're trying to be partners in this development and to develop an even more or even better understanding from each other and from what we expect and what companies are actually able to do and want to do.
Maybe to quickly follow up on that, because it's really quite apparent that the BAFA from the beginning was quite proactive with guidance documents, also the strategy to engage in dialogue. I think especially now that we also as a solution provider, we engage with various countries and nationalities. I think, Markus, you mentioned a similar point to me in the pre-discussion. What is the strategy of the BAFA? Is this a conscious strategy to have an open dialogue? What is the thinking behind it?
Totally, and it's got to be. It's got to be this because it will be a curve of learning for all of us that is steady growing. It's slowly growing, or it was fast growing over the last 1.5 years. Now it's more slowly growing, but it will grow for decades maybe. And we want to go this learning curve together actually with the companies, because we need the understanding of what is realistic and what we can expect from the companies. And I mean, we see so many different situations of companies, both in their structure but also in their fields where they're working in and how they deal with their risks, how they ever dealt with risk before. And we have to gain this understanding, and companies have to gain an understanding of what they could actually affect with their measures. And thus, we decided to stay in dialogue, to stay open for different solutions and different approaches, and to provide as much guidance as we can. And this is something that we will also take into the European framework. So when it comes up to the European network of authorities, we will take those experiences, and we want to show our partners that it is helpful, that it's totally helpful to have as much dialogue as possible and to provide as much guidance as you could do as a competent authority. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Let me move to the second topic, and I think we touched already upon it, the impact of the legislation in practice. And I think, Tim, you are managing European affairs in Brussels for the SME Association. You're having a lot of touch points with legislations currently affecting the SMEs, and I think the SMEs are in a unique position because they are not directly affected, they are indirectly affected, and that means sometimes they don't have the seat at the table. What is your perspective, and what is the role of the SME, and what might need to be improved?
I mean, it's quite impressive what you guys already presented, and I think we're discussing, or I'm discussing with front runners, other than SMEs, so to say, because the problem is, like you stated, they are only indirectly affected, and the effects are dropping in slowly for the time being. So we have some groups or SME groups actually who are already exposed to questionnaires, who are exposed to obligations, who are exposed to implement some mitigation measures of some levels. But the problem is actually the SMEs, mid-sized enterprises, and they're in the middle of the value chain, and that's where the problem starts actually, as far as I see it. I mean, let's take your company, Catharina, for example. I mean, you have a whole ecosystem by yourself. Then we have the SMEs in the middle, and then we have business partners who might have a totally different ecosystem. Yeah? And we are talking about companies who are in the distribution sector, and they may distribute completely different products from completely different ecosystems. Yeah? And so we have the demand on the downstream side, yeah? And we have ecosystems on the upstream side, actually. And now the main task for the SMEs, or rather the groups of independent entrepreneurs, which we represent in our association, is to find a lean process, bringing these different levels actually together, and having a common understanding which data has to be produced, which risk analysis have to be transferred from A to B. Also, who is responsible or capable of doing the different tasks coming or deriving from the Supply Chain Act and the CSDDD in the future. So I think it might be a chance for the SMEs, or especially the groups of independent retailers, to have some sort of broker position, and see, okay, we can broker between these different interests maybe, but it's slowly coming up to come back to where I started.
And most of you might not know it, but the SME Association and Prewave actually have a cooperation to try to make Prewave also available to the SMEs in kind of a Prewave light kind of a way. That's not the official name. Maybe Tim, you can quickly also say what's your expectation for that? Why did you engage also with Prewave, and what are you trying to solve?
My expectation, I think, is not important. It's rather the SME expectation from their group central, for example. I mean, what do they want? They want to have good conditions. They want to have logistics which work. Yeah, I mean, they want to have a lean service process, including now all the availability of data and risk analysis actually deriving from the regulation. So the group central has to set up a system where the SMEs can easily access these informations for the products they distribute. Luckily, oftentimes the groups already fulfill a clearing function, so they are the first creditor actually vis-à-vis industry, for example, for their SME retailers. So we have an architecture or infrastructure already in place on the banking side, and we now have to add on this infrastructure actually not only supply chain, but all the ESG obligations which are coming up.
Mm-hmm. Catharina, coming to you. So I think one of the unique positions that you are in as Endress+Hauser is that you're both directly affected, but you're also a supplier.
Yes.
Right, so it's you're B2B, you're in between. You kind of have the pressure from both sides. What is your view, and also maybe how do you perceive standardization as maybe something that can help? You mentioned it also in the preparation. But what is your view of kind of what is the pressure you're getting from your customers? What would help you towards that?
Yes, that's definitely a very good thing. So on the one hand, we have very big customers that are approaching us and want, for example, that we are filling out different kind of questionnaires regarding different topics. We are not purely talking about here LkSG and all of these human rights or supply chain diligence acts, but also about material compliance, plastic, PFAS. That's all already topics where quite a lot of customers are coming to us and want statements and so many more informations. And over the last 2 years, we see that there's such a high dynamic, and it's getting more and more. We even started that almost one person starting just only to write customer letters, general statements, filling out the questionnaires. And we see that there are so many providers out there, but they're all, for example, when we take just the LkSG topic, they all ask the same general topics, but the questions are slightly different wording, for example. And then some software providers, they allow that you only can edit the information in their system online. You cannot even download them. And on the other hand, it's just not very effective if we don't have one standardized approach on this side. On the other side, we also see that we also have so many more regulations that we need to comply with, and we also need to approach our customers with so many different regulations, laws, and ask so many different questions. So we are in the same situation that we are fearing that it's at some point too much for our suppliers. If we come in one point with, for example, region rows questions, and the next point we're coming with LkSG questionnaires, it's it's just too much for the suppliers. And this is not our core business. This is not our core competence at some point. And that's something where we really hope where this whole maybe also network effect and also the collaboration between all of the companies are going towards at some point, where we maybe have one standardized approach when it comes to questions, for example.
Mr. Wilhelm, you were one of the main authors of the guidance collaboration in the supply chain, Zusammenarbeit in der Lieferkette. Maybe you can share some of the views when you hear that. I think you were trying to incorporate some of these maybe improvements in this guidance document.
Yeah. That's really something that was just described, what we experienced as well, and pretty fast. It was pretty fast that we were reached by a large number of SMEs who told us we are just totally done by hundreds of questionnaires and code of conducts that were sent to us. And what are we expected to do with this? And actually this is not our law, it's not a law that applies to us. Can't you do anything about this? On the other hand, we had those companies who were in the scope who told us, well, there is a barrier where we can't enter information that we need to provide to you. So what shall we do about this? And we tried to get some guidance in this tension by this guidance collaboration in supply chain. And we tried to state pretty clear that it is not possible. It's just not possible to just pass the obligations to the SMEs or to your suppliers along the supply chain. That's not possible. You must not. And we are monitoring this, and we are doing this pretty sharp now. But also, we want to state that there is a chance to collaborate in a way that will lead to a better situation for the whole supply chain, so for the companies within the scope of the Supply Chain Act, but also those who are just indirectly affected. And we tried to, since then, we tried to work together with especially the branch associations to find common solutions for branches, but it could be also used then further on, for example, common questionnaires for one branch or a code of conduct that is recognized by all of the companies in one branch. And also, we're taking a closer look to not just Prewave, but Prewave and other solutions like tools that could provide an easy access for smaller companies to get both the information they need for their risk analysis and to provide to the obligated companies the information or certificates or standards that they would need to then do their risk analysis under the law. And what we hope for is that with such tools it is possible to use resources from the obligated companies and somehow hand it along the supply chain to the smaller companies so that they could easily enter in without having huge resources for this, and to then share information that are needed from everyone. And this is like the most important point, we try to state that whatever the obligated companies do, it should have the anchor in their risk analysis. And all the measures that they want to act, or all the measures they want to take under the German Supply Chain Act have to be anchored in their risk analysis. And if they don't, then they are useless for us as so they cannot show us with this that they comply with the Supply Chain Act. And thus we see a good approach in, for example, tools like Prewave, where they try to narrow the scope to the real risks that occur, and then to develop measures from that, so that the risks are directly addressed by measures that were then given in such tools. And last statement on this, we try to show that it's most important to be then open in using such tools for solutions that are already there. So a lot of also small companies are doing some stuff. They have certificates. They already had some resources they used, and there has to be a way to bring it into such solutions as Prewave, to make it usable in there, to make the data usable in there. And we're talking a lot to have an approach for this as well.
Tim, you wanted to follow up?
I just wanted to flag actually what Mr. Wilhelm just said. I mean, collaboration I think is key. in this whole procedure, because we had this discussion with the CSDDD. I was discussing this with European SME organizations, and they were quite happy about the CSDDD, saying like, yeah, but now we have this article or paragraph saying like SMEs are not obliged anymore to transfer whatever data. And I was like, yeah, but then they don't get the job, they don't get the tender. So I mean, you can play hardball, but most often, or more times than not, this is not advantageous for you, actually. Yeah, so if you want to be in the game, you have to play with the rules or the setting which is in place. So collaboration is quite important.
So taking the perspective of Prewave as the SME, I can definitely tell you that the information security certifications, we are not obliged by law, but we are not in the game if we don't have them. So this is exactly the point. Yeah. Any other comment to what we just discussed?
Yeah, maybe just one more thing. I think we really have to differentiate between passing on obligations to SMEs, which you shouldn't do, of course, but I think what won't go away is that the big corporations just demand more from maybe although they comply with the supply chain, German supply chain act or other acts, but still they require more from their suppliers, and as you were saying, there has to be a collaborative way, because otherwise the SME won't get the job.
And I mean, that's something that is given in the law. That it has to be an effective way, and it can only be effective if there's the chance for the SME to really do something with that and to really raise some impact from this. And if it's just a code of conduct that states, please be compliant with the German Supply Chain Act, that means basically nothing.
Yes.
So, and thus we need some effective tools.
I think there's some, the whole threshold discussion is very misleading and confusing for companies. So my advice usually is ignore it. Look at your risk, because that's what it's about. And that's how companies should move forward. Look at the risk. Are you at risk, or parts of your product? Is it a human rights risk that's involved there? And I think what needs to happen, I think collaboration is key. That's certainly so. That also means that competition law needs to be adapted. EU Commission has given some guidance on that, but I think the business associations really need to look into that now. Where does competition law actually need to be adapted? And also the newly elected European Parliament will have to look into that. And then knowledge development, because what's also happening is with the law, with the laws, a market was created, demand was created, which means there's money to develop solutions. And if knowledge is developed, standardization will follow, and standardization will allow digitization. And that will make things a lot more easily available for SMEs especially. So I'm quite optimistic that these kind of solutions that you were talking about, are going to be there in the coming years. Because the large corporations, they're not going to stop asking, but they will ask for standardized, I think they will ask for more standardized information in the future.
Totally agree. This is what I was talking about, allocation of roles along the supply chain, and I think it's an opportunity for SME groups especially. But you mentioned a quite interesting point, and it's competition law, and I think it is really important, because we're talking about, if you're talking about groups of SMEs, take Billa for example, a cooperative, where you have competitors working together already. Now you take, I don't know, a supplier, vertical agreements, to influence one particular supplier, maybe. There are all the red lights going on from a lawyer's point of view. I addressed this issue towards the European Commission, DG Competition, and they were quite like, but now we have some guidelines, and it seems okay. I was like, but if we're really putting something into place, I mean, we are talking about huge sums of how do you call it, of fees actually, which can be handed out from the European Commission. So there has to be more clarity actually on what is allowed and where is the leeway for the whole supply chain actually.
I mean, there's good reason for competition laws and for the Commission overseeing that there is competition on the markets. On the other side, if you cannot share data, I mean, everyone's going to do it on a, we're not going anywhere. So the solution needs to be found, but it will be tricky.
To state this, we've been in a continuous dialogue with the German antitrust authorities and the Commission as well, and actually the Bundeskartellamt was a co-author as well in the guidelines that we were given on collaboration in the supply chain. And this continues, and I totally agree. There is more guidance needed. We see that, and we address this.
Last round before we open up to audience questions. Maybe keep it quick. Outlook. So what's on the horizon? Maybe Sebastian, I will start with you, because as the legal advisor, you're always at the beginning of the wave, because people need to know if they're affected or not. What's the most requested regulatory scope of application check right now?
As we have already seen, there's a lot of laws coming up for companies. The hottest topic right now is probably still the German Supply Chain Act, but beside that, the EUDR, the deforestation regulation. So we receive a lot of questions on, are my products inside or outside the scope? Am I an operator? Am I a trader? How should I build up the compliance system and the processes? Are there any synergies with the German Supply Chain Act that I can use? How should I approach suppliers? How do I have to implement contractual provisions in the agreements with the suppliers so that I receive the information on geolocalization and compliance with national law? So there are a lot of questions coming up in this regard. CBAM, also hot topic. And then I think CSDDD, Forced Labor Prevention Regulation, they will take some more time because they only apply as of 2027. So most of the questions there are, do I fall under the regulation, yes or no? So that's basically it. Yeah, but it's not getting boring.
Indeed. Catharina, which legislation worries you the most?
Oh, quite a lot. To be honest, like I cannot decide because all of them are important and all of them need to be reported at basically the same time. So when it comes to the outlook, I would more say the CSRD and CSDDD are on the long run very important. When we look on a shorter time period, I would more say CBAM, LkSG, all of these current topics. But in general, what's more important for us is that we achieve so many synergies with all of these laws that we actually agree to achieve a high degree of automation to report everywhere. Because right now, it's really resources burning on our side. And that's not our core competence, as I just said. So we really want to go back to delivering a good service and a high-quality product. And that's why it's so important for us to also have this opportunity to have so many synergies between all of the acts, and also to hopefully do it at some point on a very highly automated way. Yeah.
Team, from the perspective of the SMEs, which one is the most urgent?
All of the topics, and then we had, I mean, the presentation before, showed it quite impressively how much is coming up actually. What hasn't been mentioned directly, but which is on the horizon, is the whole issue of taxonomy, and this worries me a lot actually, because there we are talking about banks who have to write their reports actually and get information, and if you don't provide for the information, all of a sudden you cannot be financed anymore. You go to your bank and you don't have the data, and that's it actually. I mean, we have dimmed down standards for SMEs, which are coming up, but it's not quite clear actually what the banks will demand, especially from SMEs, but it's a really important issue because we're talking about liquidity of businesses, which is still quite important, I would say. So this is on the horizon, I would say, and we have to prepare, or I have to push and prepare our members actually in order to get the ability to respond to these kind of issues.
And maybe Markus, to you, final word on the escalating ladder of regulations.
So my call on the newly elected European Parliament and also the new Commission would be, don't think of new legislation, but rather consolidate what's there, give companies a moment or a couple of years to learn, to implement, to get better, and make sure that all the legislations that were mentioned, like deforestation, taxonomy, forced labor ban, CSDD, CSRD, that they're really compatible, so that companies can work with one process and serve all of these. I think that's would also be the most efficient way in actually serving the purpose of the whole legislation, which is protecting the people and the planet. So make it consistent, try to make it easy, and then go for it.
When are you running for office again, Markus? All right, let's open the Slido if we can. I hope we have a few slides. Or you can moderate.
If you turn, yeah, thank you. Thank you for this interesting panel. I got some questions for you regarding the BAFA reports. Please name 3 top criteria that are taken into account by BAFA during the report assessment.
This question certainly doesn't belong to me, right?
Sounds like it, but you don't have to answer if you can't.
Obviously, there's a number of obligations given in the law that are all equally important, and thus we check them in the same way. Well, for us, the most important access to the reports is to have an understandable approach to the risk analysis. So we really want to see that companies put some resources and some appropriate resources in the risk analysis, and that they didn't shorten it like from the beginning. Now we want to see a large approach that then leads to an identification and prioritization of risks, and we want to understand this approach. And this is something that we're looking close to, and where we will have the most complex dialogues to see how companies did that and what kind of resources they use for they use for this. And I guess we will take some time to have this common understanding process in this field.
Thank you. I think all the questions are for you, Richard.
But then let's do 2 more.
There's experts all around me.
Will every company receive a feedback on their LkSG report?
No, no, most certainly not. And that was something that was interesting. A question that was asked from Ms. Marsing. Whether we will somehow acknowledge reports we don't. So there's nothing given in the law that gives us the possibility to say, yeah, this was a right report, or to just make a check. But what we will do is we're gonna ask those who deliver a report which we don't understand. And this is actually one of the reasons why I'm here, to get a realistic opinion on how the risk analyses are actually done and what companies use. We see that there are some tools that are used frequently and by a huge amount of companies, and we try to understand those, because then the questions, of course, will be less if we understand it in already now. Yeah.
What is the future of LkSG in terms of the implementation CSDDD?
Yeah, probably you know better, but I can give it a try. So yeah, it's a good question, because the thresholds are a little bit different between the German Supply Chain Act and the CSDDD. So we have to see what happens there. The CSDDD has to be transformed into national law. Maybe the German law will keep the thresholds of the German Supply Chain Act. So at least the scope of application doesn't change. Maybe it will change. So that's a good question. Besides, there won't be a German Supply Chain Act anymore if we when the CSDDD enters into force. So basically, what companies have to do is they have to fulfill the due diligence obligations of the CSDDD, but which go in the same direction as the German Supply Chain Act. It of course depends on how many risks you have, but generally speaking, you probably have to do a little bit more risk-based than under the CSDDD than under the German Supply Chain Act, but it's a very similar set of obligations that you have to fulfill.
Thank you. And a last one. Is it an advantage to get in contact with BAFA in advance before sending report?
I can say something about that.
Yes, of course.
Because I wanted to underline what you were saying about learning and educating, and it very much reflects my experience with BAFA, our experience. we do talk to you, your colleagues, and clients ask me, and I say, yes, talk to them, call them. And a lot of the feedback I'm getting from our clients is always, oh, that was very helpful to talk to them. Not specifically about the report, but generally, and how do we set this up, how do we set that up? And I think it should be, and it must be a learning experience, you know, where people exchange and say, this is how it works for us, this is our problem, and this is how we solve it, and it works for my sector, or the size of my company, or the governance of my company, and it is efficient in the sense of the law. So I think this exchange is hugely important because it helps companies, it gives clarity, but it also, at the same time, if I may say, educates BAFA on what's out there.
True, but please don't call. Let's find appointments and let's find possibilities like this to be in contact. And we are talking especially to the associations and the branch initiatives. This is important, but if every company would just call, things would be more complicated, I guess.
Thank you, Harald. I think we have to expand our program and do a Q&A with Richard in the end. No, thank you very much for this insightful session. Thank you, Markus. Thank you, Catharina. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Sebastian. And of course, thank you, Harald.